Hey, good evening, everyone. My name is Nicholas Tone, and for this week, I am presenting over the relationships between government, politics, and economics. So, the article that I found was from the US News, and it was titled France, Spain, Latest to Pledge Halt to Gasoline Driven Vehicle Sales. So, in this presentation, I'm going to discuss some basics about climate change, some of the financial impacts of climate change, how car emissions play a role in climate change, government and corporate climate change pledges, European EV markets, government subsidies, and tax benefits. So, first, what is climate change? Climate change is long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns. So, burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gases that trap heat. And some of these consequences are intense droughts, fires, flooding, storms, melting polar ice, and raising sea levels. So, the target for global warming is 1.5 degrees Celsius. Currently, we're at 1.1 degrees Celsius. So the financial impact, right? We expect and by a 30% reduction in crop yields, a world cost of 140 to 300 billion dollars a year by 2030. And in the US, we could expect a $2 million a year cost by 2100. So on the left, you'll see a chart kind of showing the GDP impact from global warming. And you'll notice that a majority of the impact is in Asia, specifically South Asia, comparative to Europe, and varying ranges of that GDP impact based on water stress, physical events, and heat waves. You'll also notice that there is a difference in impact between upper and middle class than there is lower and middle class. So it is disproportionate and affects the lower to middle incomes much more significantly than the upper and middle class incomes. Just slide. Okay. So the next impact is we're going to talk about car emissions because that's kind of what this article is about. And you'll see here on the left that fuel combustion makes up for 74% of greenhouse emissions in 2020 in the EU. And of that 74%, 23% is from transportation, which includes international aviation. So a significant amount. And on the right, you'll see greenhouse emissions by source and sector from 1990 to 2020 from the EU. And you'll see a lot of data showing that the EU is doing a pretty good job on majority of greenhouse gas emissions except for transportation. It's actually gone the opposite direction as all the other sectors and is increasing. So it's kind of trending in the wrong direction. So, there may be need to be some more policy to help direct that in the right direction. And so that kind of comes to the zero emission vehicle pledges. So this is kind of a pledge that shifts 100% of new car sales to zero emissions by 2040 and 2035 for leading markets. So in this pledge, there's 214 total signatures that include countries, municipalities, and companies. There are 5 automotive companies that have signed this pledge: Mercedes-Benz, GM, Ford, Jaguar, and Volvo. On the left, you'll see a kind of a comprehensive view of different companies and what their pledges are. So on the top, you'll notice the internal combustion engine bans and electrification targets. So these are all countries that have put some sort of ban on EVs or gasoline engines. And the bottom kind of is net zero emission pledges. Those are countries that have kind of, as overall market, have decided to be kind of carbon neutral. This was kind of the best image that I found that kind of had a comprehensive view of different countries and their different policies. One update, because this is kind of a very fluid, changing policy, is that the European Union has actually recently decided to ban and shift all their new car sales, zero emission vehicles, to 2035. So you can imagine 2035 having a European Union tag above that, which would then slide countries like Germany back to 2035 on that illustration there. And the European EV market itself, so we can look at the battery electronic vehicle sales are up 16% year over year in September. Plug-in vehicles make up 24% of new car sales in September of 2022. And it's projected that annual growth of plug-in vehicles is 17.8% growth from 2022 to 2027 in the EU. Now, this market has an estimated $340 billion in 2027. Of those companies that are involved, Volkswagen has the largest market share at 10%, followed by Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Tesla, and Audi. So there is significant opportunity in the market. I think that's what I want to kind of get from this slide, is that there's a lot of opportunity here. And some of that's driven by legislation, and that plays a role. So on the left, you'll see some monetary EV incentives in Western Europe. Some of those are just providing monetary compensation for choosing an EV vehicles. And then I'll also demonstrate on the right, there will be some EV tax credits. So the US offers $7,500 for EV vehicles that are fully assembled in the US only. So to tie this into some of our reading this week, that's kind of protectionistic tax. And so the EU and South Korea are actually trying to apply for an exemption. They also think that it violates the World Trade Organization, because the US has only said that it only applies to vehicles that are fully assembled in the US. So there's a little bit of controversy around that. Excluding the EV tax credits, there's also infrastructure tax credit, where the US offers $38,000 for installing EV charging infrastructure. So there's a lot of incentives from governments trying to push and grow this market and encourage suppliers to offer EVs and consumers to purchase EVs. Now, on this next slide, I show kind of the European consumer. So not all European countries are treated equally. You'll see Scandinavian countries are ahead of the rest of Europe in terms of acceptance of EVs. So they're much more willing to purchase EVs. So I wanted to show this one just to make sure that we don't group Europe as all one kind of consumer, and distinguish the different countries and regions within Europe that may be different. Previous slide showed Italy, that offered one of the highest compensations for EVs, yet they're nowhere near the top 5 for consumers. They're only at 9%. So the consumer there in Italy has a high incentive, but is reluctant to purchase any EVs. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. On this slide, you just have all my references. If you have any comments or questions, please just post those and I will be sure to reply to those. Thank you very much for replying, and I hope you enjoyed and learned something in my presentation. Thank you.